This week's episode of our show has been sponsored by Stibble's Codex of Companions, which is now available for pre-order at the Ghostfire Games online store.
Designed by our amazing friend Logan at Runesmith, this book is jam-packed full of crazy critters to add to your games.
Your characters can befriend these companions and follow them on their adventures. So for all of you that have a party that is notorious for building up a small menagerie of adorable followers, this is the perfect way to get some rules for that so that you can control the chaos that such creatures bring.
So you can add all of these fun and adorable little monsters to your adventuring party by pre-ordering the book using the links below.
Stibble's Codex is coming off the rails of a fantastically successful Kickstarter campaign and is now coming up for pre-order for its eventual delivery very soon.
So check out that pre-order in the description below. And now, onto this week's episode.
Greetings, my name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. Welcome to our channel where we cover everything Dungeons & Dragons, including advice for players and guides for Dungeon Masters.
We upload new videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
It's been a long wait, but this is part 1 of our tier rankings for the Wizard subclasses in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Wizards are blessed with a plethora of subclasses, so this is going to be a 3-part series to begin, with the 4th part where we cover the Natasha subclasses coming down the line. So today, in this episode, we're going to be looking at the first half of the subclasses available in the Player's Handbook. Part 2 is going to cover the other half of the PHP. Part 3 is going to cover the other ones that have appeared in other books. And Part 4, which will be coming down the line, will be covering the new subclasses in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything.
If you look on the screen right now, you're going to see the criteria that we use to rank the subclasses. We've pitted the subclasses against each other and not those of other classes. We also don't take into account the flavor role-playing of the classes, as anybody can choose how they're going to role-play them and role-play them really well. We might touch on some multi-classing, although that is not a core mechanic that we are looking at when deciding the ranking of these subclasses.
We consider all pillars of play when we are ranking the subclasses. It is not just their raw combat efficacy. We are looking at how well the subclass augments the character's ability to contribute to exploration scenarios, as well as interaction scenarios and negotiations, as well as investigating and being that repository of magical lore and arcane might that we expect from all wizards. Furthermore, many of the wizard subclasses are based around this theme of specializing in a school of magic. However, they're not restricted to the schools of magic, so our rankings are not going to assume that the character taking this subclass restricts themselves to their respective school of magic, because you don't need to play your character that way, and you can involve as much or as little of the school of magic as you want to when you're playing one of these subclasses.
There's a lot to discuss today, so let's get rolling. It should be noted that the core 8 wizard subclasses all present a similar ability that is a savant ability that allows them to scribe spells of that school of magic into their spell books for less time and cheaper. We aren't going to discuss that for every single class because it's the same for all of them, and it's a pretty average ability that they all get.
So with that, let us dive into the School of Abjuration. Wizards who are focused on defensive magics that create arcane wards and dispel the magic of rival spellcasters.
Right away, they have an ability aptly called Arcane Ward. They have a magical shield that absorbs damage. This shield has hit points equal to twice your level plus your int mod.
It takes damage for you first, and when it's reduced to 0 hit points, the damage carries over onto you. Fortunately, though, you can recharge your ward by casting Abjuration spells, and your ward regains hit points equal to twice the level of the spell that you just cast.
At level 6, you gain Project Ward, which allows you to use your ward at a distance of 30 feet to help out an ally by absorbing damage for them. At level 10, you gain Improve Abjuration. Now you can add your proficiency bonus to Abjuration spellcasting like Counterspell or Dispel Magic.
This allows Dispel Magic and Counterspell to be used still at 3rd level, but still effectively take down much higher level spells when you have to roll the dice to see whether or not you dispel or counter the spell.
Lastly, at 14th level, you gain Spell Resistance. This gives you resistance to damage from all spells, and it gives you advantage on saving throws against spells.
I have to say, I like the Abjuration Wizard, but I find it a little bit bland and defensive. As someone who has played many wizards over the years, I like the defensive features of the Abjuration Wizard. They definitely make you a little bit tougher. They make you an awesome anti-wizard wizard. But I do find that a smart player really doesn't need these defensive features when they're playing wizard. If you are worried about your wizard being squishy, the Arcane Ward is like boosting your Constitution score by 4 and gives you a little bit of self-healing. This can really add a lot of toughness and defense to your wizard. But it doesn't really augment any of your offensive or control capabilities, which means that if you're playing your wizard really well and you're using your spells really, really well, you might never need them. In my books, the best defense is a really good offense. And I've ended far more combat encounters with a well-placed spell and never ended up having to take damage from a spell or get hit with a melee attack. And the Abjuration Wizard doesn't help you do that in any way. So for me, it's a B. I think that the defensive features are great if you are worried about your wizard being squishy. But I don't think that this allows you to do anything that you couldn't do already with your wizard. And certainly, I think that the wizard spell list has tons of great defensive tools, and which are more than enough to keep any wizard alive. This is gravy on top of that. It's good gravy, but, it's not the beef.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit here, and I'm actually a little surprised in my disagreements because the Abjuration Wizard was very low on my radar. But the more I looked into it, and the more I sat with thinking about these options, the more I started to feel like this is actually an A-tier subclass. Here's my reasoning. All wizards have access to the same spell list, and that spell list is a great toolbox. Really, regardless of the subclass you're picking, you can have a tool for every situation. Now, some people are really good with tools, and they open up their toolbox and they know what the 40 different wrenches and screwdrivers are. I open up my toolbox and I know how to use a hammer and one other tool. And a lot of players, I think, when they take the wizard, aren't going to be this necessarily smart wizard player that you're talking about.
Okay.
And I don't want to say that nobody's smart when they play a wizard. I just mean that there is a learning curve with how to use all the tools that a wizard has perfectly versus when you're a new player playing a wizard and you're dabbling in spells and trying to figure it out. And for a long stretch of the learning curve of understanding how powerful a wizard can be, I feel like having defensive features on a wizard is really, really great. Not only are you going to be able to block a lot of damage coming at you, and let's be honest, even when I played a wizard for one of my first characters, that wizard went down quite a bit.
Yeah.
And that wizard got damaged quite a bit. And having an extra shield or a ward on that would have been great. When you look at something like the improved Abjuration, which allows you to be the shutdown king for other enemy spellcasters, you can really change some clutch situations in the game.
I just think, though, if you are in a situation where you have to counterspell a spell, I really don't ever want to roll that die. I want to have the assurance of upcasting the counterspell in the times that it matters. Even with the bonus, it's an impressive bonus, don't get me wrong. There's something about that it still is a gamble.
I think you and I play wizards a little differently, and although I agree with you, there are more situations where my limited higher level spell slots I really want to keep for those higher level spells, whereas I see an opportunity to counterspell, and there's always that weight of, oh man, do I upcast it so I can just get rid of this spell, or do I cast it and bank on the roll? With the Abjuration Wizard, you are less likely to blow higher level spell slots on counterspell because you can more reliably count on using the appropriate spell level slot for it.
But there's still a chance it doesn't work.
Yeah, but that's Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that this is an A. I think that this actually makes a really great case for a more sturdy wizard. We haven't even talked about spell resistance. Just blanket spell resistance at 14th level is going to be good. A lot of high-level campaigns deal with enemy spellcasters, and you are not going to worry about them. You are actually going to be clutch in the situation of being able to stand up to enemy wizards, shut down their spells, absorb damage, and be a game-changing element on the battlefield.
But I mean, at the same time, any wizard can cast Global Invulnerability.
Okay. You're right, but can any wizard counterspell as good as this one? No.
Yeah, that's true.
Can
Okay.
any wizard absorb damage the way this one does? No.
All right, you convinced me. I'll give it an A, but I still... I don't think it would ever be my first pick. Like I come back around to it, I'm like, oh, is this the time I'm going to play an Abjuration Wizard? And the answer is, nah, this is the time that I'm going to play another one of the other subclasses.
I agree with you on that. But that's also because I think there are 3 or 4 other wizards that I'm ranking A or S as well, and those are my first choices. But I think the Abjuration has a really good avenue that a lot of people will enjoy. Might not be you and me,
Okay.
but I think it's good.
You make a good argument, we'll give it an A. Next, we come to the School of Conjuration. This school of magic focuses on summoning extraplanar creatures to fight for you, like demons, devils, and elementals, conjuring up utility items to use in the field, or magic to poison your enemies with, or even using teleportation magic as well. It's a very diverse school of magic, actually, and one of my favorites in the game. Let's take a look at what the Conjuration Wizard actually gives you, though.
First of all, you gain Minor Conjuration. This allows you to summon small items and trinkets into your hand. The item has to be less than 10 pounds and smaller than 3 feet in length, and it is visibly magical. This has to be an object that you've seen before, and it can last for up to an hour, and you can only have one of these items at a time. Still can be really useful.
Yeah, all you have to do is see the key on the guard's belt to be able to conjure up a copy of it.
At 6th level, you gain Benign Transposition. This allows you to teleport 30 feet, or you can swap positions with an ally, as long as they are willing to do so. This requires an action to do so, and it recharges on a long rest, or if you cast a conjuration spell, it will recharge as well.
At level 10, you gain Focused Conjuration, and your concentration on any conjuration spell simply cannot be broken by damage, ever.
And at 14th level, you gain Durable Summons. Any creature that you summon has 30 temporary hit points on top of their existing hit points. The Conjuration Wizard is something that I really enjoy the concept of. I like the idea of conjuring up minions and monsters to fight by my side, and conjuring up magical entities and spells. What I think the problem here is that the things I wish I got out of a conjuration profession as a wizard, I do not get with this subclass. It takes until 14th level and late game for me to actually be able to buff my conjures, which I think is one of the more essential pieces of this, and I find that it comes on really late. I do think the teleportation ability is really cool. Swapping places with an ally or teleporting 30 feet is always going to be useful, so I do not think this is a bad class. I also think that the conjuring a minor trinket or object has a lot of implications for creative players. So what I think this package is delivering is some really cool features for creative players, but not all players are going to use these to the most beneficial, and I also wish there was actually more here that added to my abilities to summon and the power of my summoned creatures. Things like 30 temporary hit points on a summon is cool, and not having to roll concentration checks on my summons is cool, but there's a lot of other concentration spells that I do still have to worry about. And also, both of those combined don't really give me the master of minions that I feel a conjuration wizard could be. And although I'm not comparing this to other classes, I will say that there are better summoners out there, which means that as a person who wants to fulfill my conjuration needs, I might not look at the wizard as my first go-to, meaning that this subclass for me ranks as a B. I think that there are enough things here to play around with, and again, creative players can have a blast with some of these abilities. I just wish it did more for my conjures.
I agree. This subclass is by no estimation one of the best summoners in the game. I think it's pretty far from it, in fact. They're no better a summoner than any other wizard.
Yeah.
The Benign Transposition is neat, but it's an action to use it, and it recharges when you cast conjuration spells. And I think that it's a hard sell when it's an action to do this 30-foot teleport, when you already have Misty Step, which is a bonus action teleport, and still lets you do something else. I think a lot of wizards naturally invest in their ability to concentrate on spells, either by taking Warcaster or getting the Resilient feat anyways. And as you said, the list of concentration spells on Conjuration only is a pretty narrow limitation. If this had been an ability that you got earlier, like at level 6, and applied to all your spells, that would have been cool. And I do ultimately feel that this subclass needed something along the lines of like, your summons are kind of better. But it's definitely one of those early 5th edition subclasses where the designers were worried about making summoning too powerful. As far as the ability to just conjure up any object, it's very hard to quantify just how creative somebody could get with this ability. And I think if you do have someone that is truly brilliant, that has the right opportunity, it's like, bam. But the limitation that you have to have seen the object probably prevent, and the fact that it's also visibly magical really shuts down a lot of the shenanigans that you could pull with this. Because ultimately it's like, whatever object that you need, just pull it out of your butt. Right? So I agree. I think a B is appropriate for this subclass.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I don't think anything presented here is bad. It doesn't take away from the wizard in general. But like you said, I think a really important statement is that I feel like any school of wizard can be good at conjuring. Mm-hmm. This does not make me feel like I'm better at conjuring. It gives me some useful tools that a creative player could have so much fun with, which in the right campaign makes this a really strong candidate for a great wizard. But if I want to play a conjurer, I might look at what I get in the packages from other wizard subclasses and then just take some conjuration spells to have my minions and monsters.
Can you foresee how we are going to rank this next subclass? It's the Divination Wizard. The School of Divination concerns all sorts of magic that is used in omens, foreseeing the future, gathering information, and spying on one's enemies and allies. And the School of Magic comes packed with a very unique feature right away at 2nd level called Portent. At the start of the adventuring day, you get to roll 2d20s, and you record what those results are. Thereafter, whenever you or another creature within range you make an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw, before the die is rolled, you can choose one of those 2 rolls that you made earlier and say, no, they get that result. Once you use that result, it's expended and you can't use it again, and then you re-roll this whenever you take a rest and you get new rolls every day. But this ability basically gives you the power to, instead of rolling the dice, exactly know how the dice are going to come up on 2 die rolls over the course of the day.
At 6th level, you gain Expert Divination. When you cast a Divination spell up to 5th level, you can regain a lower level spell slot of up to 5th level. This can actually do this thing where you can string together divination spells and cascade downwards, getting a bunch of free casts of various divination spells.
For example, you could cast True Seeing, and that would give you back a 5th level spell slot, which you then use to cast Scrying, which gives you back a 4th level spell slot, which you use to cast Arcane Eye, which gives you back a 2nd level spell slot, which you use to cast Clairvoyance, which gives you back a 2nd level spell slot, which you use to cast Detect Thoughts, which now gives you back a 1st level spell slot. So it lets you kind of bring a lot of information into play. Even though many good divination spells also happen to be rituals, there's many that aren't. So this is kind of a fun way of gathering lots of information and getting more out of your spell slots.
At 10th level, you gain Third Eye, which gives you a magical vision. You get to choose this vision and reset it when you rest. The vision options include the ability for dark vision, to see invisibility, to see into the ethereal plane, or to read all languages. And once you choose one, you get to just keep that until you're incapacitated or you take a long or short rest.
You can change this whenever you finish a rest as well, so you can adapt this to whatever form of magical vision or sight that you need.
At 14th level, you gain an extra Portent die, and now you can roll 3 dice instead of 2.
This is a phenomenally powerful subclass in the hands of a player who knows what they're doing. And also in a campaign or with a dungeon master where your ability to use divination magic is going to be relevant. Portent is a jaw-dropping power, but it is a very difficult power to use. Oftentimes, most people see this ability and they say, okay, so I'm going to roll these dice and I'm going to get like a 2 and a 3, and then I'm going to cast Hold Monster on the bad guy, and that's going to cause them, and I'm going to use the Portent to cause them to automatically fail the saving throw. The problem with this is that sometimes you roll your Portent dice and you get a 17 and a 12. And it's much harder to figure out what to do with those. Now, you can use those to succeed on an attack roll or a saving throw, which is awesome. You can use those as your initiative roll. But when the dice don't come up in your favor, it's a lot harder to then use Portent in that amazing encounter shutdown sort of way. The other big problem that doesn't always get discussed is that Portent doesn't get you around legendary resistance. The wording of legendary resistance says that when you fail a saving throw, you can choose to succeed instead. So if you cast Hold Monster on a dragon and choose to say, hey dragon, here's your 2 on your saving throw, that dragon can go, nah, I got legendary resistance. And that's a tremendous waste of the Portent ability. So on paper, Portent has this mind-blowing thing of making your spell automatically stick. But I can tell you, from playing 2 Divination Wizards, it doesn't always work out that way. It doesn't always work out in your favor. And sometimes you also play adventures where your divination spells just don't work. Out of the Abyss messes with divination magic. In my own Dungeons of Drakkenheim campaign, the entire city of Drakkenheim is covered in a magical haze, which impairs divination magic, and that's a really important plot point. And it basically shuts down scrying, contact other plane, and all that super fun divination magic that you would normally use to gather information about a dangerous dungeon. There's tons of spells and magic items that shut down divination as well. And so if you're playing in a campaign with a dungeon master that wants to shut you down as a divination wizard, they can do so very, very easily. And then you end up going, this subclass is not quite what it's cut out to be. There's a part of me that thinks that there's actually a really compelling argument to give the Divination Wizard a B. Bet you didn't see that one coming. At the same time, my Divination Wizard was phenomenally powerful and did some insane things because of Portent. And in my heart, I want to give this an S because I feel that Portent is that good. But I know at the same time that I have encountered the limitations of this ability, and I don't think that it is the best ability in the game for making your spells stick.
It's tough because all of your arguments are valid, and you and I both discussed that this is one of our favorite subclasses in the game. The Divination Wizard does this really miraculous thing where the element of Dungeons and Dragons that is based on luck, which is the dice rolls, this is the subclass that gets partial control over the luck and fate of the game system itself, which is incredible. Not to mention that something like that cascading spellcasting that we talked about means that a divination wizard relying on divining and gathering information basically gets a slew of free spell slots to do so.
I want to interject about that one thing though, because the thing is I have to admit, I've only pulled off the cascade once. That is very fair as well, but I will also say that getting free spell slots for any casting of a divination spell. So you cast a divination spell and poof, you get a spell slot But this is
back.
the whole problem, Kelly, is that the divination spells themselves that you would expend a spell slot to cast have a very specific purpose. So as far as divination spells go, scrying is actually the only 5th level spell that you would normally cast to get a 4th level spell slot back.
I'm not talking about the cascade anymore, though.
Yeah.
I'm just saying getting a spell slot back, which can happen.
Yeah.
I've seen you use scrying when you had spell slots blown.
Yeah,
I've seen you use Arcane Eye when spell slots are blown. So there are going to be many cases in the game where you do, as a diviner, use a divination spell, even if it's one, but then another spell slot pops back. That, to me, is a really key element here. And I'm not disagreeing with you. I do think that this is really hard to pull off. And what's really a challenge here is I think that when we make the case for this being a B subclass, which I don't want to do because I think it's an S as well.
Okay.
The B case is when you get dungeon masters who shut down divination, which I actually think not necessarily the campaign, because I'm going to argue as well that in Drakkenheim, I use Contact Other Plane. I used some divination spells really effectively, and there were cases to be made for using them. We couldn't use them to spy on our enemies in the city, but we could use them to gather intel in other ways. So having a DM who shuts down divination completely and doesn't give you what you're hoping for out of divination is not a good DM-player relationship. If you come to the table with a divination wizard and your DM is like, scrying doesn't tell you anything because I don't want it to. Well, now you're just shutting down the entire thing that this player was excited to do.
I just want to say, though, I've had that exact experience in multiple Adventurers League games.
But I don't think that's good. And so by giving it a B, we're saying DMs are going to be jerks about your divination magic.
It's not, but it's a really tricky thing because the divination wizard just casts scrying and sending, and the adventure's over. And there are adventures that can happen, so the DM has to shut them down. It's a weird thing. Ultimately, I do think that this is an S tier subclass, but I just want to share my experience of the limitations of what that means.
I can accept that, and I think it's important for our audience to understand that we're giving this S because the divination wizard has a way of bending the literal luck of D&D in its favor. However, there is a case to be made that this could be a B subclass. You might bring a diviner to a table with a DM who shuts it right down, and you're going to feel like garbage playing that character at that table and wish you had played something else. And that's unfortunate because I think the Divination Wizard offers a really unique and interesting playstyle.
So finally, we come to the enchanting and enthralling school of enchantment magic. This often deals in subtle suggestions, but also has a tendency to dominate its foes. Right away when you take the subclass at second level, you gain the Hypnotic Gaze power. This power allows you to walk up to a creature within 5 feet of you and use your action to hypnotize them. They are incapacitated, their speed is reduced to 0, and at the start of your next turn, you can continue this effect by using your action again. They do get to make a wisdom saving throw the first time you walk up to them, but once they fail that wisdom saving throw, as long as you continue spending your action and stay within 5 feet of them, they remain incapacitated and immobilized by your magic. What is very unique about this ability is that it neither requires your concentration, and it doesn't have a limit to the number of times you can use it. The only caveat here is that if the creature succeeds the initial saving throw or breaks out of the effect, and any damage does break the effect, it cannot be affected by it again until you finish a long rest. So this means you can use this power over and over and over again to incapacitate your enemies while concentrating on another spell. It's like getting a cantrip that incapacitates foes that just has a range of 5 feet.
At 6th level, you gain Instinctive Charm. If you're the target of an attack from a creature within 30 feet of you, you can force the target to make a wisdom saving throw. If it fails the saving throw, you can move the attack to another target other than you within range of that creature. This works on melee attacks, ranged attacks, and spell attacks.
You don't get to choose the target. The creature simply has to choose the nearest target, which is either not you or not themselves, and if there's multiple that meet that criteria, they get to choose. But again, like the Hypnotic Gaze power, there is no limit to the number of times you can use this. It's simply based on the target. If a creature makes its saving throw against this power, you can't use it on that creature again, but as long as it continues to fail its saving throw, you can just brush those attacks right off from.
At 10th level, you gain Split Enchantment. If you use an enchantment spell that targets a single target, you can have it target 2 creatures instead.
The list of eligible spells for this ability is insane. It includes Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Tasha's Mind Whip, Hold Person, Hold Monster, Suggestion, Otto's Irresistible Dance, Power Word Pain, Power Word Stun, Feeble Mind, and Power Word Kill. Did I mention Dominate Person and Dominate Monster? Because it works on those too.
Lastly, at 14th level, you gain Alter Memories. When you charm a creature with an enchantment spell, you can have it forget the time that it was charmed. The amount of time that the creature can forget is equal to 1 plus your charisma modifier, and the creature has to make an intelligence saving throw. If they fail, you can choose any amount of hours equal to the highest amount you can, and decide how much they're going to forget. Enchantment is known for sleep and hypnotism, but you should not sleep on this subclass. I think that the Enchanter surprised me. When I first got into D&D, I read all the wizard subclasses, and I don't think I ever revisited the Enchanter until maybe in the last year when I started rereading all of these to do these videos. And what was interesting is I think I did sleep on the Enchanter. I think that these options present really unique and interesting play styles. Basically, the way that I look at this first ability, the Hypnotic Gaze, is almost like the Monk's Stunning Strike, but you don't have to punch them. It's a Stunning Strike cantrip. So you get to walk up to a target and grab their head and just be like, all right, I'm controlling your mind now. You don't get to do much more than just put them into a daze, but there's a lot you can do with a creature in a daze. Instinctive Charm is a really powerful defensive ability, and I actually think works really well against a group of ranged attackers who are trying to hit you. If they are all within 30 feet of you, that means that you can deflect those attacks to another creature within 30 feet. If you have allies by your side, it may not work the best as you're just kind of moving those attacks onto your allies. But as a squishy wizard, having the fighter or barbarian take those hits instead, I hope that they're okay with that because I'm going to do it. But if you're surrounded by enemies, then you're having enemies attack each other, and that is excellent. Not to mention when we look at split enchantment. Like, see you later, sorcerer, with your twin spell garbage. Goodbye. I can twin spell better than you. And some of the spells that you can twin spell now are really good spells.
It's so amazing.
We make the misconception of thinking enchantment is just charming people, but the list of enchantment spells has some of the most powerful battlefield control spells in the game. And being able to hit 2 targets with those powerful battlefield control spells are going to be combat ending. And if you have 3 targets, then you mind control or you dominate monster on 2 of them, and then you use your hypnotic gaze on the 3rd, and you're good to go. So
good.
There are some really amazing things that you can do. Alter Memories is actually my least favorite of all these abilities, but I don't care. They're so good, and there are so many uses here. I am surprised that I'm giving the Enchanter an S tier.
It totally is, though. I think it is possibly one of the best battlefield controllers in the game. Yes, its lower level abilities are shut down by immunity to charm. But just when creatures with immunity to charm start becoming common, you get split enchantment and can now just paralyze them with Hold Monster, which is not a charm-based spell, but still an enchantment spell. So there's lots of diverse play here. And I gotta say, I built an NPC villain that was totally built around the Alter Memories power that used it with Dominate Person, and the idea of mind controlling someone and have that person forget the experience of being mind controlled is crazy cool in just what you could do with it.
Again, I'm surprised because I thought going into this maybe a year ago when we started doing tier ranking and I thought of the wizards, my first thought was, well, the Enchanter is going to be garbage because I would never play one. I might play one. Yeah, it might be one of my favorite wizard subclasses. Who knew?
It is really good. And I think people read the first 2 powers and miss the fact that there's no limit to the number of times you can use these abilities. Because you see that sentence, which is that boilerplate sort of sentence, which oftentimes when you read an ability in the player's handbook, you start seeing, oh, you can use this once you finish a long rest. And you kind of go, okay, yada, yada, that means you can use this ability once per day. But that's not the way these abilities work. Hypnotic Gaze and Instinctive Charm are not restricted on the number of times per day you can use them. You can only use them once against a creature. And if you're using them in battle, like, great. Like, you just incapacitate them while your party beats up everybody else, and then, then they're done for.
So I think the Enchanter has to get an S tier from us, and I think that everybody should give it the chance to shine, because it will. So up on screen right now, these are the final rankings that we have given the first 4 subclasses in the player's handbook. But let's take a look at what our community thinks.
About 20% of people gave the School of Abjuration an S tier ranking, with about 45% of them giving it an A tier ranking, and roughly 27% giving a B ranking to the School of Abjuration, with the remainder falling in C and D, but just a couple slivers there. I think quite solidly. I'm glad you talked me up to the A, because our community really loves the Abjurer.
I actually really appreciate that people agree with me on this, because yeah, there's some good elements in the Abjuration subclass. When we move on to Conjuration, we're looking at just a very small sliver for S tier, only about 4%, where 25% give it A, 45% or so give it B, and another 25 or so % give it C, with just a small amount for D. So again, very much this lands in the B tier, and people are in agreement with us.
You don't need to see the future to predict this ranking. 62.9% of our respondents gave the Divination Wizard an S tier ranking, with 22% giving it an A, and only 10% giving it a B, with only a slight sliver for the C and D rankings. Okay, it's definitely an S tier. I apologize for my faithless display earlier. I should have seen that coming.
I do think, though, that there is the case to be made for dungeon masters who might shut down divination magic, but if everybody's playing the way that it's supposed to, this is an S tier subclass. When we look at enchantment, this is where views start to differ. Only 4% or so gave it the S tier, with 24% giving it A, 42 or 43% giving it B, and another 27 or so % giving it C, and just a small amount for D. This puts it safely in the B category from our community. I, too, was thinking of giving this a B, and it wasn't until Monty and I had a deep conversation about the implications that I realized this is a very powerful subclass. I do think, though, that perhaps maybe there is a case to be made for the resistance to charm, or maybe some of these elements are harder to use than I'm giving them credit for. But it's hard to say. I think that there is really powerful options in the Enchanter that have flown under the radar for a long time.
Yeah, I think it's worth a second look at the Enchanter if you did give it a B ranking or lower, and really look at those abilities and consider how the character might work in play, both in and out of combat. I think it's a very potent subclass and worth a look. I see the argument that immunity to charm is very common and can be a frustrating thing to experience for the subclass, but I don't think that that is insurmountable. And the split enchantment ability, like, I just want to remind folks that split enchantment works with Tasha's Mind Whip. Tasha's Mind Whip doesn't worry about the charmed effect, and that means that the wizard's 18th level feature, which allows you to select a spell that you can use at will, would let you choose Mind Whip. So now you have twin Mind Whip
as your go-to cantrip.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely do hear you, and maybe Monty and I are crazy, but I like being crazy.
Maybe we're just hypnotized by the guiles of the Enchanter. So let us know if you disagree.
So up on screen right now, you're going to see, again, our final rankings for the subclasses, the first 4 in the player's handbook. Next to that, you're going to see the community rankings. Overall, we had very similar opinions. Monty and I are just under the spells of an enchanter right now and need to deal with that. The wizard itself is a bag of tricks. There's such a good spell selection and so many different ways to take the wizard that really the subclass is just kind of the little added flavor you want on top of your already amazing spellcaster. And all of the options presented have something cool and unique. I hope that our opinions help you decide which ones are the most satisfying for you to play. So this has been part 1 of our Wizard subclass tier rankings in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Tell us your opinions on the Wizard subclasses in the comments below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible support of our Patreon community. If you enjoy the work that we create here on YouTube, please consider becoming a supporter of our show by following the links in the description below.
And don't forget that our live play Dungeons of Drakkenheim is coming to Kickstarter. We've partnered with Ghostfire Games to bring this campaign to life as a 5th edition module. You can follow the links below or go to DRAKKENHEIM.com to join the mailing list and get up to date on all the information regarding the Kickstarter. And don't forget to check out our live plays in the Worlds of Drakkenheim, which airs Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern on our Twitch channel. You can find all the previous episodes right up over here.
And we are almost done ranking all the subclasses in D&D 5e. You can find the full list of all those episodes right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time
in the dungeon.